The first shout out that I'm going to give is to, the SEC agents that are inevitably in this space right now with burner accounts. I hope you feel great about destroying families' wealth. I hope you feel great about extorting founders. And I hope you feel great about wasting taxpayer dollars. And I'm doxxed, and I totally expect you to talk to me one day. So I can't wait to have that conversation. The next thing that I want to address is what you just said, Joseph. Just before I start talking about my thing, what's the difference between the ICO language with Ethereum compared to the sacrifice stuff here? I think there's major differences. So the SEC is alleging that Hex, Pulsechain, and Pulsex offerings met all of the legs of the Howey test. And it actually, the document surprisingly and not surprisingly doesn't mention anywhere Ethereum's ICO. But to address your question, with Ethereum's ICO, there involved an exchange of Bitcoin for Ether, which if you're looking at the Howey test, that's a direct investment of money. It was in a common enterprise because Ethereum's ICO was conducted by the Ethereum Foundation, and that was funding the development of the Ethereum platform. So they were actively going out, and they were very clear about raising money for this. So I would say that the term sacrifice is much, much different than a direct request for money from investors. They did it with an expectation of profit. Many early participants in Ethereum, a lot of these guys were doctors, a lot of these guys were lawyers. It was word of mouth. I think the initial raise was something like $20 million or somewhere close to that. So that can be seen as an expectation of profit. These guys are trying to get into to hope that the value of Ether increased over time. And then this was also very dependent on the Ethereum Foundation, the development, the adoption of the Ethereum platform. And how do we know that? Well, let's just take Gary Gensler's words when he's teaching at MIT. He goes over this. He makes the case many times on YouTube that Ethereum checks all the boxes. Okay, you don't want to pass the Howey test, and he says you don't want to pass the Howey test, and Ethereum passes the Howey test. So given that, you could definitely say that Ethereum's ICO, the way it was operated, was fundamentally different, completely different than the way the Hex was operated. It was fundamentally different than Pulsechain and Pulsex. And I hope that answers your question there. The thing that I need the community's help with is we're getting to the point now where we've got enough influence in this space to where we don't have to worry about hopping in other people's spaces as much because we pull such a big crowd on our own. And I think it's really, really cool that a lot of us have had the opportunity to talk to some folks with much bigger audiences. And that's going to go really, really far if we have the right messaging, which I think Buck has said this. I've said this. I think Katie said this to some extent, which is, this isn't necessarily, RH versus the SEC. This is DeFi versus the SEC. OG Mike, he said this is human rights versus the SEC, and all of those are correct.
Being, sort of following Richard from the very first Roger Ver interview, it's great to hear everybody's echoing the exact same reason why I'm in Hex here in this space. So, and it's true. I mean, Richard, even just in talking about, he's like, oh man, there's this thing. I can't tell you about it because that would set up an expectation, but it's going to be, he's super careful with his language. And it is all informed upon trying to stay on the right side of the law. And I think if we allow people who say, allow people to water down the meaning of words, everyone tries to be okay, this person said this, and then they try and reinterpret it. Well, he didn't actually mean that. He really means this. Be well, then what is the point of words? If we're going to try and redefine what everyone says, then what anything says means anything. So I always think it's interesting. And one of the things that I think that came up the other day, or just with some of the commentary by Eric Voorhees, just talking about Hex, and he'll say it's not unique, it doesn't do anything different, and it's just a bad product. So I cheer on the SEC and Uniswap slapping down Hex. It doesn't make any sense. It would be like saying, going to Gucci and being that designer stuff that you made for Richard Hart or that you sold in your stores is ugly and has no utility. Therefore, you should not be allowed to sell it. It's just the total opposite of why crypto was invented. Crypto's invented to be borderless, to be permissionless, to be open, to be censorship resistant. Like all of the things that crypto is founded upon are the same ideals that Richard holds. And he built Hex and Pulse and Pulsex in that, like, under that greater cypherpunk crypto umbrella. And it's disheartening to see the larger crypto community crap on Richard because of feels or personality. And one of the things that really got me started on Twitter was challenging people there who'd be like, "Oh, Richard's a scammer." I'd be like, "Okay, like, explain it to me then. Like, read all 2,600 something lines of code and tell me where the scam is." So it's interesting. I find this space, like, incredibly fascinating. That's why I think that, that's why I wanted to sort of embark on the mission to get this documentary made. It was from Richard's, like, if you want something done in the community, go out there and do it. Like, I don't work for you. And that's, I think, why Hex has the vibrancy in the community that it does, because everyone went out and made their own things, and all of the tools. I don't even know if some of the people even know about some of the, like, early reporting tools, based on Kibana, where you could run, all of the different reports. You could look at staking and unstaking and who's staked and what wallets are staked for how much and how long. I mean, it was literally like a data, analysis person's dream to be able to jump into Hex. Richard didn't build any of that stuff. The community did. So it's interesting. And I think the biggest thing that for us as stewards of the community, we need to impress upon the greater aspect of crypto is this is it. Like, this fight for crypto and DeFi, it's happening here, and it's happening with Hex, whether you like it or not. And the SEC, is going after Richard because, he became a parody of a scammer, with the outrage marketing and all this stuff. Like, the fact that it's not obvious to people, like, how hard can you go out of your way to look like the cringiest person on earth to draw attention? Like, who on earth actually thinks that that any of that is, genuine beyond, a parody?
It kind of got my gears going last night. And I pulled up the documentation for the court documentation. If you go to page 9 on the actual PDF of the charges here, so this is point number 28, and it says, in an earlier YouTube stream on July 16, 2019, Hart admitted how important his efforts were to ensuring that the Hex token, once launched, would be available for trading on so-called crypto asset trading platforms. And it goes on to say, in fact, before the close of the Hex offering, Hart contacted representatives of a so-called crypto asset trading platform at least twice through Twitter messages. So in those messages, Hart discussed the potential promotion of Hex tokens on the platform through Twitter. And then the last sentence said, and this was actually very important, that's going to lead me to my point. It says, it appears that on December 15, 2019, the platform began listing Hex tokens on its so-called decentralized crypto asset trading platform. And I surmise that they're probably talking about Uniswap here. And given the information that Jimmy put out, and also given the information that Uniswap was one of the first people to kind of delist Hex, I have a strong suspicion, especially with the COO being a part of BlackRock, being in that good old boys club, that Uniswap is going to play a very, very serious role in trying to attack Richard. And I suspect that maybe the SEC is using Uniswap as leverage against him in exchange maybe for some type of immunity in this whole process. Now, did he do anything wrong? Don't think Richard did anything wrong in the process. The other thing that I want to point out is later on the documentation, it also says that they decided to submit this suit in New York because that was the place of the foundation of Uniswap, and that's where they're headquartered. So, guys, I would say this. I would want to reach out to everybody in the community because you guys are really good at what you do, digging into stuff and figuring out. Maybe do some more research on who this woman is, what role she might have. The people that she's known, maybe comments that she's made about crypto in the past, because I think that there's a little hint here about what's going on. And I think Uniswap, in my opinion, is playing a big role.
So I can add a bit of a comment because, yeah, Uniswap are playing a bit of a role. Uniswap provided user IP addresses. So when I started tweeting out about use dexes that don't harvest your data, that's because part of this SEC case is Uniswap put up with the SEC because obviously they do have a HQ in America in Brooklyn, right? So they are at the mercy of the SEC. One of the things that they did was put up user data, right? And what they did to help the SEC is say most of the people that were transacting and purchasing Hex were located in America, right? They have put that up and given that to the SEC. That's part of the case now. So yeah, Rags is perfectly correct. The SEC and Uniswap are definitely, in it together. Uniswap is definitely working with the SEC and more than happy to comply. And yeah, how much further it goes, I don't know, right? So like using VPNs is really never more important because they're trying to say that most of the Hex users and most of the Hex traders are based in America. And apparently that stands grounds for deeming something, more of a security, which is completely irrelevant and it doesn't, right? But they're using data collection from Uniswap to make more of a case. Like it kind of shows that they don't have a case, right? But it also shows that Uniswap isn't great. And yeah, Uniswap is very, very happy to assist the SEC.
Yeah, make sure everybody in this chat, if you're listening, make sure Uniswap understands how frustrated you are. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Give them hell. I think that's a much better way to say it.
Yeah, I think that's part of why I was trying to be vocal, right? And my point was stop supporting Uniswap. And I didn't mean just go put up another front end for Uniswap, right? Like my point is, why do you want to support a decentralized exchange that is happy to assist the SEC to try and bring us down, right? Happy to assist the SEC to give up user data that they harvested without telling you, because I don't know about you guys, but back then, like they didn't put up information saying on their front page, hey, we harvest your data. We harvest your IP address and collect that information on you based on your address that you're interacting with. Like I didn't really get to see those disclaimers, right? And they're happy to sit in bed with the SEC and provide additional so-called evidence to build a case around our community, right? And then on their UI, they block Hex. That is massive in its own because the entity, Uniswap, are doing that. But you go putting up a front end for Uniswap and still interacting with the Uniswap contracts. For me personally, I'm not telling anybody else what to do, right? Everybody's a market participant. You make up your own decisions. But I wouldn't provide liquidity through their LPs. Why would I support the DEX that is happy to assist the SEC? Because it wouldn't just be through our community. They would be happy to assist the SEC in anything, right? There is forks of Uniswap everywhere. You don't have to use Uniswap and you don't have to use it through a different front end, right? For me, I don't want to support Uniswap because of what they're doing, right? It is massive and it's bigger than what people realize it is. And Rags is right. You should tell them that you are disgusted if you are disgusted, right? And you should tell them how you feel, right? Because at the end of the day, yeah, they are at the mercy of the SEC based on their location, but they also don't have to act in bad faith, right? That's a choice.
Can you comment and say definitively if Pulsex is different?
Definitively, yeah, of course it is. They have a HQ based in Brooklyn, right? Like they have employees.
No, I meant as far as information gathering. I mean, if we can't see on the front end, then on the back end, is it just that we as a community use VPNs no matter what we do?
You shouldn't trust anybody. If you're using a third-party front end for something, yeah, you should use a VPN. But for Pulsex itself, like part of that data harvesting is to sell your information, which comes from a HQ and employees, like coming from your entity, your establishment, right? Being American-based. Like that is part of where it comes from. Pulsex doesn't have that. Pulsex doesn't collect user data. But at the end of the day, like you shouldn't, okay, I hate to say it, but like you shouldn't even trust Pulsex. You shouldn't trust anything. Like you should always use a VPN. If you believe in privacy and you don't want your data to be collected, you should utilize VPNs on everything. Because everybody collects your data. Like it's not just in crypto, right? They just use more crypto things against you. If you go on a shopping website to buy some clothes, sorry, I'm a girl, right? If you go on the shopping website, like that website collects your data because people pay them a lot of money to collect and harvest that data from you, right? Like, yeah, it's everything.
Does the record show that Outrage paid Uniswap in any way, shape, or form? Was there any allocation of Hex to anybody?
No,
Okay. Then,
I think the
on the
only
other,
incentive that Uniswap would have is the fact that people would be using the exchange and Uniswap would collect their protocol fee, but that's not anything.
exactly, they listed it out of their own, desire to list it. And initially, if Hex is not a security, then what else follows? What else is a fact? Does it matter who listed it if at the end of the day,
So
Hex is not a security?
I need to put a comment in there because you made a comment saying that they chose to list it, which is incorrect. Uniswap V1 just was a same as a DEX now, but the difference was you could only put ETH on the other side, right? You could
Okay.
only put ETH to your token. There was no option to put USDC and all these different variants. It was just ETH, nothing else. It had to be ETH and the other ERC20 token. Okay, that was Uniswap V1, but it was still market participants putting up the liquidity, right? That's not going and saying, will you list my token? Like, I'll pay you to list it like a centralized exchange. It's still market participants in those liquidity pools. The only difference between V1 and V2 was the ability to put different trading assets on the other side of the pair, right? Not just ETH.
Right. So I think we are still back on the fact that if Hex is not a security, then what else? When this inquiry dropped, most of the community members, they became a little bit fearful. But at this point, there's really nothing to fear because of everything that has been said. And the community has already been trained to delay gratification. If for anything, it's only gonna take time. So we're just gonna be happy, and disciplined, and wait for a little bit of time to see how it goes. But for sure, it doesn't look like it's gonna go their way. If, like has been said, XRP was deemed not a security, there's no way Pulsechain, Hex, Pulsex can be a security. But one thing is that they can go around and say whatever they want to say, but the Howey test is clear. They can say whatever they want to bring a case, but when the court look at it and they just say, "Well, I don't see anything here," it goes away, and there would be a big marketing opportunity for Hex. And we also know as a community that you can only control. We can only control ourselves. At individual basis, you can only control you. You cannot control what other people say or do. So based on whatever they do or say, you control yourself. You bounce back. You do what you need to do. And I think that's what the community is doing. For sure, I'm very happy to be in this community and be behind Richard Hart. Like Katie said, if there's anybody that knows what they're doing from day one, it's Richard Hart. So again, thank you for what you guys are doing, keeping the community straight.
I just wanted to say, I was like many Hexicans that was getting a little annoyed with the whole Outrage marketing situation. But now I'm sitting here going, this is fucking pure genius. I mean, this is already probably discussed, but I'm a fan of boxing. And the greatest boxer that ever lived, Floyd Mayweather, in my opinion, he was the greatest because he had the ability to bait his opponent. He baited his opponent all the time into thinking they had something when they didn't. I see this, what Richard Hart did with this Outrage marketing, as one of the greatest baits of all time. This is my opinion. I could be totally wrong here, but it all makes sense now. But I really do feel like this was like a bait because, like you said, you said it yourself. The guy didn't need to spend $12 million of SAC funds. That's ridiculous. Everybody knows he was worth more than that before the whole SAC phase. So just want to throw that out there.
They just really put the focus back on DeFi. And this is just one of many attacks that the SEC is doing on DeFi in general, right? And, this community takes this whole situation extremely personal. But remember, this is one of how many lawsuits the SEC has filed recently, right? This is one in a long chain, right? So as far as they're concerned, it's not personal. They're just going after like everybody. So this is really more of an attack on DeFi. It is not so much specifically one community, one person per se. This is about like, will DeFi survive, and will it survive in the form that we know it as today? And do we give control over crypto and DeFi over to SEC and other governing bodies or not? Right. So I think that's the other part of this is just, not only taking emotion out of the equation, but remember, what's the real issue at hand here? It's not about Richard Hart. It's not about, Hex or Pulsechain. It's about DeFi, and DeFi being controlled by SEC, CFTC, and other bodies, right?
Right. Like they're doing whatever they can to keep some sort of like semblance of control. So like, here's an example of what this looks like. You know how like Ben Armstrong and Coinbase have been begging the SEC for regulatory like clarity, and the SEC just won't give it up? Well, they're doing that on purpose so that when we come to a time like what we're in now, they're just throwing shit against the wall that's called the word security. They're just throwing it everywhere, and whatever sticks, and whatever they can get away with, right? That's what they're doing. They're intentionally not like telling people, hey, Coinbase, XRP, they're just calling everything a security now, and whatever sticks. So like, that's what we're supposed to do, is we're supposed to fight against that, because
absolutely
the people that are doing this, they're smart people. They're not stupid. They may be corrupt and greedy, but like they're not stupid. They know what they're doing. Like if they come out and they say, no, Ethereum's not a security, well, what weight does that carry in precedence for the rest of history, right? I just don't see the people, being like, yeah, sure, okay, like fine, whatever. No.
I think that the conversation that's taking place right now with not only Hex, but the other 20 plus projects that have been implicated as securities by the SEC here recently. What really needs to happen, in my opinion, is Congress has got to step up, because you have a tyrant that's in the SEC that, instead of working with projects in a collaborative way, he's using enforcement to exact his revenge on retail. I've gone into some other extreme theories and speculations as to why he's doing what he's doing. But Isaac, I really think that conversation is what needs to take place. That it needs to be defined in such a way that I think is not going to retroactively punish people who have stuck their resources and stuck their neck out to kind of build this out and build for this space. And I think it's extremely unprofessional, and I think it reflects very poorly upon the SEC as an agency, that between three SEC chairs, they can't get their shit together and come up with some sort of common language or common actions. And what you see SEC Chair Gensler doing right now is he's in front of Congress and he's blaming Congress. So he's like basically saying, yeah, as long as you let me go murder people, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And it's up to you guys to stop me. That's what he's saying. And I find that extremely destructive. I find that mildly sociopathic and completely unacceptable. And we need Congress to step up, I think. That's the only thing that's going to stop that dude right now. Or I think he's out of office in 3 years. So whatever comes first. If Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen retires, he'll probably be the Treasury Secretary.
On YouTube, he has a whole series. He used to be a professor talking to students, talking about the blockchain and crypto. He used to talk about Bitcoin, Ethereum, and what is considered a security and not a security. Now, all of a sudden, he's did a whole 180 on his conversation of how he feels versus what it was back then. Take those clips, post it up, bombard him with that, right? Like, these are your own words you use, and you used to talk about crypto. This is what you used to teach your students. And all of a sudden, you're doing a whole 180 on your own thing where you used to teach folks. So I think use that as clips too.
2 points that I've seen that drive the opposition narrative, or 2 of the main ones. One is that Richard used SAC funds, to do whatever and own thing. I think it could likely easily be proven false. But the other thing that every anti-Hex Richard Hart's Spaces stream defaults to is that he promised returns. And that is just, you can look at any video, any tweet, he said language is important, and he was very careful, and still is to this day, about what he says. It can do something. It's possible for crypto to hit these prices because it's done in the past. Nowhere ever has he made that promise. So if you're in these other spaces, that those points can, that one in particular that just drives me nuts because it's just baseless and they haven't even done their research on it, can easily be refuted. And I don't know, it just drives me crazy when I hear it. And that's one of the easiest points that could be shut down immediately.
I 100% agree, right? And like speculation, even within the community, is not guaranteed, and speculation isn't like an expectation. Right, so like I said a little bit earlier, expectation from the work of others comes down to the part of what is the Howey test, or how do you pass the Howey test to be a security. And one of those side things to the common pool with expectations is managerial and entrepreneurial efforts done by the founder, right? So that is technically expectations, not speculation, right? That is an expectation. So if Pulsechain had a foundation that paid grant programs to build on Pulsechain, that is an expectation of profit off the work solely of other people, right? You're expecting the foundation to go out and build you an ecosystem, an established ecosystem, and go get these partnerships and bring these people in for you, right? Like, we don't have any of that. Hex has never had a paid centralized exchange listing. None of it. That is an expectation if Richard was to go work for us. So, like, I even see comments in our community that Richard doesn't do anything. That's amazing. Please don't ever expect him to, right? Because that leaves us vulnerable. Richard doing nothing is the best thing that could ever happen, because again, the man studied securities back in 2017 when he was designing Hex. Like, he knew what he was doing. He knows what defines a security. He's the one that sat on stream and said the common pool with expectations based off the work solely of other people, right? That's somebody saying, give me your money. It's like, send me 1 ETH and I'll send you 2 back. There's no difference between that and like an FTX. You give me your money and I'll give you, an extra percentage APY every year. But they don't tell you what they're doing with their money. It's just the common pool with expectation of the return solely of that entity, right? That person, SBF, them people providing you with that. That's a common pool with expectations. Like, going back to the things around it, the managerial and entrepreneurial efforts. Richard's only ever live streamed and talked about crypto, like talked about it as a whole. Said what he will build, and he delivered what he said he would build, right? He has said what things could do based off historical things in the past and things that are similar to the things that he has built, saying it could do it. That's not a guarantee. There is no speculation to say it definitely will do it, right? There is definitely no expectation that it will just because he said something. You can't take the man's words out of context, the biased opinions of other people, right? It doesn't matter if you like Hex, right? It doesn't matter if you support Hex or like Richard Hart. At some point, people need to care more about the facts, the blockchain digital ledger technology that has the whole transactional history, and just those types of basis things, and understand that if Hex was ever deemed a security, right, so the people that are screaming that they want it to fail, right, that they want it to be a security, I don't think they understand the gravity of what that means for the entire space. Right, because it goes back to everything about it. Litecoin sells the top. Vitalik sells the top. The Ethereum Foundation sells the top and laughs about it on camera and said, I made the top. Like, I got the Ethereum Foundation to sell the exact top I dumped on your heads. The Ethereum Foundation wallet dumped on your heads at the top, right? Chainlink sells Link at the top of the market and dumps on your head the Chainlink wallet. The Hex OA has never sold a coin. The Hex OA has never done anything, right? So people that sit out there and FUD or 90% of the supply of the Hex OA, our Hex OA has never done anything besides move in good faith, right? The Hex OA has never sold a coin. So if you want to base a security like grounds around an OA, which honestly doesn't hold any grounds to deem it a security, but people taking those biased stances against Hex don't understand the gravity of what those stances actually mean for everything else that they support, right? Because the people that are supporting all these other things, Hex breaks those things. Okay, like going back to everything, even back in the adoption amplifier, part of the SEC case, trying to deem Richard Hart a market maker. And again, I went through market making, and market making is the act of arbitrage. You have arbitrage every single day. There is nothing that actually showed on the digital ledger technology that it was Richard doing it, right? It was the flush address that had a public call function that moved ETH to it. The ETH in that flush address moved in the best interest of Hex, right? Because of the ratio difference between the adoption amplifier and V1. So it arbitraged the two to make it not have the ability for users to exploit and extract economic energy out of the ecosystem, right? So that is arbitrage. That is the definition of what that address did, right? So if you're trying to say that's market manipulation and being a market maker, that is by definition arbitraging. So arbitraging between stable coins then falls under the same thing, right? The same category. Yeah, people need to be careful of what they're supporting because they're going to have an undoing. Did start to revolutionize staking. Whether people want to give Richard that, you know, top of the hat and admit that, but it did revolutionize the way staking was done in the DeFi space. Okay, like you can speak to developers, right? There is ETH developers that will happily admit that, and there's other ones that won't admit it, right? It has bit shift and bit packing. It has Merkle tree in the code itself. It's a ground up build. It's not a fork of anything. But people were able to fork and take lines of code from it and aspects from it to, you know, build their protocols off it and build their contracts off it. So what made Hex special when it launched was not only did it launch completely and utterly finished and completely decentralized to the point where you struggle to find a loophole that puts centralization in its launch, right? It had no managerial and entrepreneurial efforts by Richard put into it at all. No marketing paid by him. No expectations because he did absolutely nothing for Hex besides talk about it on YouTube streams. He paid for nothing, right? Like absolutely everything about Hex's launch, including its code, is what made Hex special, right? I know many products that changed their like design, so to speak, based around what Hex did. So that's just my perspective again.
I'll comment that Richard has gone to dinners, but he's never paid for dinners. And one of the jokes at the dinners has been, I don't want this to threaten, you know, being a security.
Yes, because that could technically, with the SEC, be classified as a managerial effort because he went to dinner to be able to talk and put his point across, right? Like, down to every last aspect. And you are right, Gary. Like, every tiny thing, right? He always has it in the back of his mind. Like, if you start building a product in 2017 with the whole entire concept of a security and how to defy the logic of ever being defined one, like, he has spent more years considering the SEC than anybody in this entire space.